southwest France. I'm Diana, I'm a watercolourist. Today I've changed my location a little. I'm upstairs in my apartment, sitting on the window seat with a lovely view out onto the town. And by my side I have my peace lily. Really the plant she's excelled herself just now and has two wonderful flowers, and then the third one will appear. Years ago I painted the peace lily. I used to go painting at the local plant nursery every Thursday, and I would choose a plant to paint, and one day I selected a peace lily. I'll show you the painting as we go through the video. I want to use the wonderful flowers that we see as a tutorial, helping you to paint white flowers by painting in the negative and using the background to bring out their true beauty. White flowers are always difficult to capture, and the secret is in the background. So stay with me whilst we have another adventure in watercolours. Here you can see the watercolour that I painted of the peace lily. According to the date, it's 2005. It only seems like yesterday, but time passes so quickly. But here it is, the palette of blues and greens, the background very loose, wet on wet, which is the thing we're going to do first of all. The flowers, of course, are white, as the flowers that I have on the plant who's doing so well just now. And you can see I've applied a little shading in grey just to give depth to the flowers, but we'll come to that in a later step. The first thing we're going to do is to add the wet on wet background to bring out the shape of the flowers. I have paper here which is Arches 300 gram rough grain, and I have just with the pencil indicated the shape of the three flowers according to the flowers on my plant at the moment. That's the only pencil work I'm going to do. I have my palettes ready, a glorious combination of blues and yellows to give me a whole variety of greens. Basically here on this palette we have Windsor Blue Green shade, which will help us to create the lovely blue greens on the original painting that you see. And I also have a blue palette with ultramarine blue, which does put in an appearance. I like using ultramarine blue for wet on wet backgrounds if I need texture, because it granulates and it encourages other colours to granulate. So we have this lovely granular appearance here. Also I have another palette here with a variety of greens, transparent yellow here, ultramarine blue and Windsor Blue Green shade again. I think it might be Windsor Blue Red shade. We'll see when we come to mix it. So I'm all set to go. So the first thing we're going to do is to paint the background, wet on wet. I have my paints all set to go, and with a number 10 mop brush I'm going to thoroughly wet the Arches 300 gram paper. Now I am taking my time over this. The video is speeded up 3 times normal speed, but even so it seems to take quite a long time, but this is for a reason. I want to make sure that all the paper is shiny wet, and I have to work around the 3 peace lily flower heads that I've just indicated with pencil. So I'm being careful to be accurate around those pencil lines, and also I want to make sure that all the paper is thoroughly wet. A mop brush like this is a good means of wetting the paper thoroughly. If you use a flat hake brush, it tends not to wet it as thoroughly, and you do get some missing areas on the paper. So I'm just making sure that it is all wet. There will be some bits I've missed, there always are. But I'm going in with colour, and I'm very much aware of, in this picture, the light is coming from the left. So I'm going to apply my blobs of colour mostly on the right hand side, a combination of all the blues and greens that I have available on the palette. I know I've said this before, but preparation of the paint on the palette is the most important thing to do before you start painting. And immediately I can see some areas where the surface tension on the paper has not been broken, so I just adjust that so I don't get any little white patches. But you can see already the central flower bud, the paint has run around it and not invaded the drier area. It's magic really doing this, just love it. And although the video is speeded up, it is important to work quite quickly, especially when the weather is warm, the temperature in the room is warm, and the paper starts to dry. It always needs to be shiny wet when you're working wet on wet. I have more blues on the right hand side, because this is my darker shady area, and you can see the shape of the peace lily flowers just emerging now as the colour runs around them. So essentially we are creating the peace lily flowers by painting them in the negative. That is adding the area of colour around the object to create the object. It's known as negative painting. Just let it run and flow, and there they are. I don't want to mix the paint too much. I don't want it to become all one shade. I want us to be able to see the blues and the greens still there. And I'm just tidying up the edges with a small liner now. And now the paper is dry. And now I'm also going to work wet on wet. This time I'm going to start to create the leaves. And I'm wetting the area very randomly. You can see the shape when I hold the paper up. You can see the shiny wet areas. And now with a liner brush, I'm just adding colour. It's going to run into those wet areas, because paint always does when you apply it to wet paper. The water will distribute the pigment, the paint pigment, much better than I can do with the brush. And I'm just introducing it in different places, not really following the pattern of the leaves, apart from the fact that they seem to be growing from a fairly central point. I can even drop the colour in and let it run along the areas that are wet to create natural shading and natural light and dark areas. And then I can cut across them with the brush to give a crisscross effect and add more colour. This is a really exciting way of painting. Without having to be too accurate, you can create the effect of a jumble of leaves and the light and shade they produce. You can see I have two brushes to hand, a mop brush and my liner brush, so that I can apply bigger volumes of paint and wash the colour in with more water and use the liner to emphasise the drier areas, giving us depth and more detail in some areas. More colour going on, and you can see how the colour will run just into the areas that are wet. This is the magic of painting wet on wet, and it should be an enjoyable experience and not a frightening one. If you feel a little bit apprehensive, Just tell yourself it's just a piece of paper and enjoy the process. Now you can see it's dried much lighter, but that's okay, we can return to it later. And now I want to start to do the detail on the flowers, which is painting wet on dry, and I'm adding some Payne's Grey shading to the inside of the flowers just to give them depth, and washing it with the liner brush. I have enlarged the image a little, so I hope you can see it clearly. And the yellow centres have just had a little transparent yellow added to create that. This video really is all about painting wet on wet, but the detail of the flowers is important too. So this is why we include it here. The bud in the centre has just shading on the right hand side. I'm just taking a hint of the stems. Even if the stem on any flower that you're painting is quite thick, it's good just to start off with one continuous line and revisit it later. So now I want to go back to my leaves. We have the basis of the leaves now, and we don't need to darken them all because some of them will be lighter and in the background. But I can use the liner brush to start to create leaves which are more detailed and darker in shading. And again, I'm using my selection of greens on the palette. We have the light yellow green and blue greens, just to give us that variety of light and shade. And of course, the peace lily leaves are very shiny and glossy, so they do reflect the light and do show up as being different colours of green. It's always good to move the piece of paper around to get into a comfortable position so that you're not going to smudge any bits that are still wet as you paint. And as you do this, the painting starts to come alive and have more depth and interest. And the contrast created by the different greens give it more depth and help to emphasize the whiteness of the flowers. Always adding more colour and introducing blue into the leaves as well. I love it when a painting starts to come alive and you start to feel that you have captured the essence of the flower of the plant. The area at the base of the plant will be much darker because it's in the shade, and so this gives us the opportunity to add more colour here and more depth. Going in with that blue colour, which was Windsor Blue Green shade, we can see that now it gives us a lovely blue-green. This mop brush is a natural hairbrush and so holds a lot of paint, which you really do need for this kind of work. Now we can run some more colour into the wet areas. Wet on wet is working its magic. Now you can see the two watercolours side by side of the peace lily. This is the one we've been working on obviously throughout the video. There's still quite a lot of contrast and detail to add, as you can see from the finished watercolour here. Because I've used lots of wet on wet techniques, adding colour, running colour. We have depth here, and now we can capitalise on it by adding more light and shade. Considering that the light is coming from the left, the leaves will be lighter on the left hand side, and to the right there will be more contrast. So I have here two palettes, my Windsor Blue Green Shade Transparent Yellow palette, and also Payne's Grey Burnt Sienna. I'm not going to do the whole process now, that would take too long, but I have started to emphasise the areas of shading, considering the fact that the light is coming from here. And so we can begin with a dark mix of greens, adding them on the right hand side of the leaf where the leaf will be in shadow, coming down, following the contours, so we create more contrast. And that we won't do this with all the leaves. As you can see here in the original, some of them I have left really pale, others are more detailed and darker, and this gives depth to your picture. Similarly, you can see with the flowers, we have the Payne's Grey Burnt Sienna mix, creating a soft grey to give the cup shape of the interior of the flower, and a little bit more definition on the stems. So again, it's a question of adding the shading down following the line of the stem, carefully following it with a very delicate line, and then just gradually washing the colour in to create a more substantial line. But you can overdo it with stems, and stems can be too thick. They are not as important as the leaves and the flower. And so I can carry on now with this introduction of contrasting shade, just taking it down to the limit of the leaf, washing it into the area as when required. So the whole thing starts to come forward and gives us more depth. This process will go on. The picture isn't finished, but I hope I've taken you through enough of the stages to see how we start by painting in the negative, that is, creating the background around the flowers and then focusing on the detail. I hope this will inspire you to try these same techniques. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you found it enjoyable and inspiring. Painting wet on wet is always an exciting process, just to let the paint flow and the water do its work. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave any comments you may have. I always enjoy hearing what you have to say, and I welcome any suggestions that you have about future subjects to cover. Till the next time, happy painting. Bye.